Support comes from Jovell Motorsports in City of Industry, California. It's Shifted Perspective on Sociology of Cars podcast. I'm your host, Shift. In this new season, my goal is to bring you other professionals that also live and breathe the automotive and racing industries. Through real conversations, we'll highlight diverse career paths, insider knowledge, and the mindset required to succeed. Today, I have another guest that I brought in from Porsche Experience Center as well, Ren. Ren is a fellow coach as well, and he has a background in racing, which we're going to dive deeper into. Ren, happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Definitely. Now, Ren, let's start off with, tell the audience something about you that you normally don't tell people.
Yeah, so honestly, what's kind of funny is that what I usually don't tell people is that I'm a race car driver. Just because in like normal conversation with like people who aren't into racing, the like knowledge gap of like what racing even is so wide that like when you're just having like a casual small talk conversation, it just feels like so forced and like inaccurate to say like, oh, I'm a race car driver, because they always ask like the same three questions. It's always, oh, is that like F1? How fast do you go? And have you ever crashed? And and like I understand that, because you know, if I were like in their position, I would probably ask exactly the same things. Mm-hmm. Like I met a guy who was a McLaren dealer, but like a salesman at a dealership like a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And he was telling me about like some, you know, test drive stories and like nightmare test drive stories. And like the first thing I wonder is like, I wonder if you've ever had some crazy shit happen, and like, has anyone ever crashed? But like, I didn't ask that because I'm like, I know how annoying those questions are. So I always try to like avoid it and just like get people talking about like, you know, what they enjoy and stuff like that as much as possible. And then like when they ask like, you know, oh, what do you do? A driver, Andy Lally, once told me, he was like, oh, when girls ask me what I do, I just tell them I'm a heavy equipment operator, and then they never ask anything afterwards. So I used to do that sometimes, but then that would get more questions. So now I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm a race car driver, you know. And they're like, oh, okay.
I mean, technically it's not wrong.
No, it's not. Yeah. Like you're operating heavy equipment, and they're like, okay, that's boring. Like next.
Now, do you ever get the person that's just anxious to ask you more questions, or is it just that the person trying to just grasp the idea of what you do?
Yeah, it's more like people just like have no idea what like circuit racing even is. So like the questions that they ask, like I said, it's usually like, how fast do you go? Because like people don't even understand that like racing, like by definition, is like a competition, you know, like whether it's like racing against a lap time that other cars are trying to do, or racing wheel to wheel or whatever. Like it is a competitive thing. And like, I think most people think that racing in like an automotive sense just means driving really fast. Mm-hmm. And so like they hear like, oh, race car driver, and they're like, well, how fast do you go? Because they don't understand that like the speed is not really something you focus on. Cause like, you know, what normal person ever has to think about like braking technique or like brake release or like line through a corner and stuff like that. That's just like so foreign to anyone. No one's ever heard of that. But like, again, in a casual conversation, you can usually never like bridge the gap of knowledge for them to like actually understand what you're talking about. So yeah, like people do tend to, you know, ask questions like that. And I think they do like genuinely want to understand, but I just like, I always feel bad because like to effectively answer those questions and like fully, you know, answer them honestly, it would just take up so much time. And I don't like to talk about myself to people for like an extended period of time.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Ren, where did your passion for driving begin, and how did it evolve into what it is today?
When I was a really little kid, I really liked trains. So I would watch Thomas the Tank Engine a lot. And I had like a bunch of model trains and stuff. And then when I was I think I was 5 or 6, the Disney Cars movie came out.
Oh, yes.
And I remember like one of the opening scenes was they have like a bird's eye view of, they called it like Motor Speedway of the South, but it was Bristol Motor Speedway, like the half-mile kind of Coliseum track.
Oh, okay.
And, you see like under the lights, these like bright colored cars just going in circles with like stands full of, in the movie it was cars, but like, fans. And I was like, that I had never seen that before. And I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So like from then on, like seeing that movie, that was the only thing I cared about was racing and cars. So yeah, around 5 or 6, Lightning McQueen brought me into it.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, what did you drive initially when you actually got behind the wheel?
Well, honestly, nothing. Like when I was 7, one of my dad's coworkers' kids like moved away and they gave me his PlayStation 2. So I had Gran Turismo 4 when I was 7, and I played so much of that game. My dad got me like one of those plastic Logitech steering wheels too, to just like clamp to the coffee table in his living room. And from like age 7 to 20 or so, that's really all, or I guess 21 or 22, that was really all I like drove. Like I never went on a real racetrack until I was 22. So
okay, primarily simulation then.
Yeah, pretty much just sims. And then when I was like 20, I switched over to iRacing, which was like, that was it. That was like a main shift in my like thought process and how I saw driving and like my place in it. Because when I was younger and like a teenager and I was just doing like Gran Turismo, they had these like weekly challenges where they had like a drift challenge and they had like a time trial challenge. And I would spend like, hours after school until like 2 a.m. like trying to get on like the top 10 of the leaderboard, because everyone could see like the top 10 when they did the challenge.
Right.
But like you watch like racing on TV, that doesn't really feel like the same thing as like doing Gran Turismo, like time attack challenges. And then during COVID, when I got iRacing, that was kind of when all of like the real life series had shut down temporarily. And so like a lot of the guys that I watched on TV were on iRacing. On iRacing, you have to use like your actual name. So like you see there's like Max Verstappen, Shane Van Gisbergen, and William Byron, like, people that I watch every weekend on TV. And I'm like racing with them. And I was like, wow. Oh, this is pretty legit. Like I'm door to door with William Byron. Like I should probably, try to do something with this if I can. So that was kind of the thing that like switched it from being like, when I'm older, maybe I'll like get a Spec Miata when I have a real job and money, to being like, I should probably try to make this my career while I'm still reasonably young.
Wow. Now, you mentioned some big names. When you were in those same spaces with them racing, was that intimidating at all to you? Yeah,
for sure. And it still is, honestly. Like when even like getting into real racing, like I did MX5 Cup last year, and I've been a fan of that series for years. Like I watched, the race replays on YouTube since probably 2020 or so. And then when I was like in my first MX5 Cup race, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like pushing Gresham Wagner and like banging doors with Jared Thomas, like people that I watched on TV. And it was the same thing in the sim. I was like, oh my God, like that's Max Verstappen in front of me. Or like, oh my God, I just like spun out Gabriel Bortoletto, like stuff like that. So yeah, it's intimidating, but like at the end of the day, when you're actually in a race and like in competition, it's just another car. Like you kind of forget about it. Like you don't, even if you're like nervous and like hopped up on adrenaline, like you, at least for me, I end up like subconsciously treating them the same way. Like it's just another car to pass. Even though it's kind of nerve wracking to begin with.
Right. And in a way you just lock in and just go for it.
Yeah. Once you're there, like it's hard to describe, when I like do open practice and stuff, like I'll make a mistake and I'll get thrown off and I'll like throw a lap away and whatever. But like when you're in an actual race, if you make a little mistake and whatnot, you can't be like, oh, that sucked. I'll like get back on it next lap. I'll chill the rest of this lap. Like you just have to like stay focused the whole time. And so like, if you bang doors with someone who you like really respect, you can't be like, oh my God, like they're going to be mad at me. You just gotta like keep your foot in it and keep going and like talk to him after the race if you need to.
Right.
Which feels kind of crazy for starters, but again, like it's no different from banging doors with, you know, some other guy at Button Willow and Spec Miata.
Makes sense. You just got to, you know, keep your head down and keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I know you mentioned a little bit about MX Cup, but we'll touch on both really. But how did you discover MX Cup, Spec Miata, and what was the deciding factor for you to participate?
Yeah. So I, when I was like 12, I bought my first Miata. It was like this, it was the rustiest Miata I've ever seen. I grew up in the Northeast. So, you know, old 90s, 80s cars are all rust buckets.
Right.
But yeah, I was like 12 years old and I had done this like go-karting clinic at Lime Rock. Cause like, you know, my parents always wanted to help me get into it, but they didn't have any money to. So that was a big deal. They could helped me do like a day of go-karting. And the guy that ran that clinic had a Spec Miata that like he raced himself. So he parked it, you know, next to all of the go-karts and stuff. And I was 12 years old. Like that was probably the first time I like got to sit in a race car or something.
Yeah.
And so I like went on the internet after looking for Miatas and I was like, oh my God, Miatas are like $2,000. Like that's basically the same as the race car that I was just looking at. So I found the worst Miata you've ever seen in your life. It was $900. And it was fun. My dad went with me. We like rode a train to go pick it up and drove it home in Connecticut. But from then on, I was like a Miata guy. And like my goal was always to like make enough money to be able to race in Spec Miata. Again, I never really thought that it would be like a career for me, like racing in general, but I was like, the one way that I can go racing is probably Spec Miata. And so for most of my like teenage years in high school, I would just like buy cheap Miatas, wrecked Miatas, like, you know, unfinished projects. And I would either like finish them up, sell them, or just strip them for parts. I bought probably like 20 of them.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and it was all like in the name of like making enough money to race Spec Miata. And I eventually bought my first Spec Miata when I was 17. It was funny. If you know who Russell Ward is, he's an IMSA driver.
I think I've heard of the name.
Yeah, they won GTD last year,
Nice.
But they're like the 57 car. Him and his dad started racing, I think around like 2016, 2017. And they started in a Spec Miata, just like practicing. And now they're like winning everything. Like I'm pretty sure the car that Max Verstappen drove at the Nürburgring was one of their cars, like Windward Racing. But I found like the cheapest Spec Miata in the country when I was 17. It was in Houston, Texas. And it was from Russell Ward. It was like his practice car that he like learned how to race in. And so I flew down, picked it up and drove it home like on slicks with no plates, like to New York. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done, but it was like all the money that I had. And that was the only way that I could have a race car. And so at that point I was like, you know, I bought a race car and I was like, wow, now I'm a race car driver, even though I hadn't done like any licensing or anything.
But it was real. It was tangible.
Yeah. I had like a race car with like numbers in the driveway, which was really cool to me. And around that time, my mom got cancer, and that was my senior year of high school. So it was just, and I was still planning on going to college and everything. So there's just a lot going on. And
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, she ended up like beating it. She's fine now, but it was a tough year, and so I sold that car pretty quickly because it was just evident that it was just like not the time, and there was no way I could have done it back then.
Right.
So at that point, I was just kind of like, okay, like whatever. Like once I finish college and get a job, maybe I'll be able to do this again. But when I was in college, I bought a BRZ just because I was like, I was on iRacing a bunch, and I was like, I really need to get on a real racetrack, and I had no idea how to. So I just like bought a car with a warranty with like a payment that I could kind of afford.
Right.
And I just did a bunch of track days in it, and I got like my NASA instructor credential. You know how they have that? They like make you sit in the passenger seat and hold on for dear life so that you can get a free track day.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's awesome. Like a free track day, you know, that was like the closest thing to like being a professional that I could do.
Yeah.
And then when I went to do their like, instructor certification, they're, NASA, like they have in their events, they have like track day sessions, but they also have race sessions, like all in the same event. In that event where I was doing that, I was watching like Spec Miata, and I saw one of the kids that I had like raced against on iRacing in Spec Miata, and I think he won. And I was like, oh, like that should be me. So at that point I was in college, and I just sold my car. I sold everything, and I bought what I thought was a nice Spec Miata. And that was when I actually started racing. It was 2022. It was like I think my senior year of college. So yeah.
Wow. Full circle, right?
Yeah.
It's really neat.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's pretty fascinating. Now, for any new person, obviously you had to figure that out on your own. So if you could offer any advice, anyone else that's coming into a Spec Miata wanting to just gain the experience, are there any do's and don'ts that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest thing is like for me, when I was getting into it, I didn't know how I was going to make it a career, but I was like, I'm doing this because it's the only next step that I can possibly think of to make it a career. Like I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew that I didn't have any other options. So for me, like when I did it, I was okay with like putting all of my money, all of my time, like eating no food to make it happen. And I think it's important to be realistic with yourself with like what your relationship with racing is. Because a lot of kids that get into it because their dads want them to, their dads, they always think like, my son's so good, whatever. And they want their son to like be a professional race car driver. But in reality, like it's so unlikely, whether you have all the funding behind you or not, that you will actually become a paid professional in motorsports. That if that's the only thing that you're setting your goals towards, like you're almost always going to get disappointed. And so like for kids that I've coached, the number one thing I've told them is like, do you want this to be your entire life and probably make no money until you're, well into your 30s, and then even then probably not make very much money at all if you even make it, period? Or do you want to like have a sustainable job so that you can have a real life too, and enough money to like pay to do Spec Miata for fun? So I think it's important to be realistic with yourself if you're starting in racing because of that. Cause again, if you're like, the only thing that's going to make you happy is if you become a professional driver, then you're 99% of the time going to be miserable for, your entire racing career. And then next thing is like the practical implementation of actually getting into Spec Miata. For me, I was pretty limited because I really didn't have any money. Like I sold everything I had, and that still was like barely enough to get this car. And I tried to find a decent car at the time. It was like 20 grand. It was, it looked nice and it had like decent history, but when I actually got it, it was not very well maintained, and it was not particularly fast. And I was like, well, like equipment doesn't matter. I'll just drive really fast. And I was trying to be like humble, like, I don't need a $70,000, $80,000 Spec Miata. I'll just do the best with what I have. But that ended up being kind of like an egotistical way to look at it. Like it was pretty stupid because I spent like about a year in that car that was just a shit box when I had it. Like it was so slow. All four wheels were pointing different directions. I mean, I didn't have like a place to store it. I didn't have a truck and trailer to bring it places. I couldn't pay for an alignment or anything. Like I just had to drive what I had. It was like a miracle when I was able to afford tires. And then after like spending a year of like, I would go buy tires, put it on pole, and then something would break 15 minutes into the race. I was like, okay, like if I'm going to spend all of my time and money doing this, like I have to actually have proper equipment. And I basically stripped the car to the chassis and replaced like both subframes and everything in them, engine, trans, diff, like literally everything mechanical in the car. And so I bought a car that was $20,000, but it ended up being about 60 grand by the time I was done with it. And that was like way more than I could reasonably afford. But I put a lot of it on a credit card and stuff like that. Like I was just being stupid because it was the only way I could make it work.
Right.
But, because of all of that, if you are like trying to get into it, If you see it as a means to an end, like most people getting into Spec Miata are like, I want to get into the MX-5 Cup shootout. If you see it as a means to an end, there's really no reason to buy all of that stuff. And it ends up being a lot more efficient, both in terms of like money and what you get out of your weekends if you just rent a good car with a good team behind you. And at the time, like, even if someone told me that, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I couldn't spend $6 to $10,000 to rent a car for a weekend. But like for the series that I did, it was a 6-weekend series. And if I spent, $7,000 renting a car for 6 weekends, that's $42,000. And that would be a lot less money than I ended up spending. And you would have someone to run the car for you. You wouldn't have to touch it. Like, I was the only person working on my car. I built it myself. I would, every now and then, Lewis at RM Autosports would bring the car to the track for me. But I was just all jobs for the car all weekend. So I could never like focus on driving or anything. I just had to like get in there and drive as fast as I could and hope it was enough. Yeah. And that ended up being a very inefficient way to spend $60,000. So if you're trying to get into it, just rent. Like, I know it hurts because tires and gas and entry fee are like $2,000 if you drive your own car. And then again, it's like $7 or $10 if you rent, but it does end up saving you a lot of money and giving you a much more like, effective outcome for your investment on each weekend.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Now, through all the trial and error that you've done, and I'm sure there were many sleepless nights, you mentioned not eating at some points. Yeah. How rough did it get? Just so people have like a true idea of what you really went through.
It was pretty miserable. When I was racing Spec Miata, I didn't live, so I was racing in California. I didn't live in California though. I went to school here, but then, I didn't have a job here or anything. So I got a job at Pecla at the same time. 'Cause again, that was like the next step for me in like being a motorsports professional. But it's a part-time job and it wasn't really enough money. And since I had to move here by myself and I didn't know anyone, I had to get a place by myself. So, I mean, you probably know how inefficient it is to be like a single person with your own apartment here as opposed to having roommates.
It's expensive.
Yeah. And I didn't know anyone to have roommates. So, and I had to move down here like at a certain date to have the job. So I had to have a place, and I ended up getting a place that was like the cheapest that I could reasonably find, but more than I could afford. And again, I was just putting like everything on credit cards and stuff. And so I stayed at that place for like 10 months. And for most of that time, I think I bought groceries like 3 times, like in that whole 10 months period. So like at the like cafe at Pecla, they would just give me all the food that was expiring. And, one of my friends like cleaned out like all the expiring food from like his parents' pantry. And I would basically like take like a can of beans and I would split it in 2, and that would be my meals for the day. It's like 1 can of beans, like just straight up red beans, like nasty stuff. And that was like how I got. And then at the end of that year, like I was still out here. My apartment expired. I certainly couldn't like afford to extend it. So I had 1 month where I just didn't even have an apartment. I was like couch surfing, sleeping in the trunk of my Jetta, like, just doing anything I could to survive. And that was about the low point, was like literally not having food to eat and also not having a place to sleep.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, that sucked. But it ended up being worth it in the end for that year.
Nice. So was it like a full year of just really toughing it out before it started to really pay for itself? It
was a few years. Honestly, I started Spec Miata at the end of 2022, and right now it's the start of 2026. I only started making like enough money to reasonably survive about 5 months ago. So it was like 3 full years of like just sucking it up.
It's dedication.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, speaking of sucking up, when it comes to women and dating now, I know you already touched on like just the whole ideology of explaining what a race car driver is, but when you mention that, if you mention that on dates, how does that go? Does it impress women?
It kind of depends. Like I would say, so I have a girlfriend now and we've been together for like 2 years. Nice. I try not to bother her with like racing stuff, and it's not that she doesn't care. It's just that like, there's only so much you can listen to when you're not interested in it yourself.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But like before we were dating too, like I would still, honestly, I didn't really have like time to go on many dates or anything, but I would still like kind of try not to mention it. Cause there's just like I said, there's just really no way for people to understand what that means. And they don't understand that like race car drivers don't necessarily like make any money. So, I don't know. It was never like a positive factor for me. That's for sure.
That's fair. All right. Yeah. It's almost like you were living like a superhero, just kind of in disguise.
Yeah. If you could say that.
Yeah. Nice. Now, you mentioned like you did this for several years, right? So, and you mentioned some bits of money and costs of certain things. If you were to put it all together for a full season, that's including, all operating costs and just all in with the car and everything you need to just sustain. What does that total sum actually look like realistically?
You're talking about Spec Miata?
If you were to do let's just say Spec Miata, if that's the cheapest racing you've done. Yeah.
So since we're in Southern California, I'll just talk about like a regional like year of Spec Miata just in SoCal. Sure. So Cal Club SCCA down here, they basically only race at Buttonwillow. When I was racing, they would race at Willow Springs too, but they haven't been there for the last few years. So I was able to leave my car at Buttonwillow, which was a huge like supporting factor in why I could afford it, because just towing it back and forth from here is probably like $500 at least each time. And then obviously you need like a tow vehicle too. So add a U-Haul rental is probably another like $600 to $800. I would say if you already own the car, running costs can be as little as like 15 grand for that 6-weekend season. But realistically, like you're going to break stuff, you're going to have contact. It's more than likely going to be closer to 25. Again, if the car is already good when you start out. And then today, like just through experience, I've learned that like a good Spec Miata is not 20 grand. A good Spec Miata is like minimum 40 grand. And if you're going to build it from fresh, it's probably more like 70 or 80 for a 30-year-old Miata, which is ridiculous. But when you try to cheap out, you end up spending more in the long run and getting a worse experience. So, if you're going to buy a good car, I would say budget at least 40 grand. And then to be safe, put aside like 25 to 30 for operating costs in the season.
That's fair. Now, do you own your own Spec Miata right now?
Not anymore. Okay. I sold it last year, thank God. But I'm trying to not own race cars anymore because I really just I can't afford it.
Yeah. So your take basically is you concluded that renting is probably just your best option.
Yeah, by far. Yeah. For me too, it would have been the best thing. For me, there was no way to rent. Like I could not have spent $7,000 a weekend multiple times. I would have been able to do 2 race weekends if I did that.
Right.
So for me, like the only way to do it was to have this crappy car that I built up over time. But if I were to be smart about it, I probably would have waited another year, saved more money, and then rented with a good team.
Okay. So it really just depends on like the urgency of the individual.
Yeah, for sure.
Just want to get into it, then you just get the car and go.
Yeah, but you're going to pay for it in every other area
in the long
of your
run.
life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Well, that's really good insight because I'm sure, it's all these intricacies and nuances that people don't really share, but they glorify racing, right? But it's like, well, what is racing? Like you were talking about. And what does it actually entail? Yeah. So it's definitely costly. It's not a poor man's sport.
Yeah. And again, not just like monetarily, like if you want to get into it and your dad doesn't own a massive company, then like you're going to pay for it in other areas of your life too. Like you're going to sleep in the trunk of a Volkswagen Jetta.
Sounds like you did that from experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. So Ren, you mentioned a few different things, but I know with your long journey of driving, from sim to actual car Spec Miata, at what point did you realize that you were actually good enough to compete?
Yeah, that was definitely when I was like on iRacing with like actual real life professionals. Cause again, like you're banging doors with guys you watch on TV. It's like, oh, like, does that mean that I could do that too? And like when I was 21, like 5 years ago, I certainly thought that I knew everything and that meant that I was good enough to just hop in whatever car and be top tier fast. And I've learned that there's like way more nuance that goes into driving real cars. Like I think a common thing with guys who are into motorsports at like an enthusiast level, who are doing a bunch of sim racing and doing track days, is like they kind of think they know everything. Have you ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger curve?
No, actually I haven't.
It's this, I think it's a ratio of like confidence to knowledge. And it basically like if knowledge is the x-axis and confidence is the y-axis, if you go up to like 25% confidence, people get to like, 25% knowledge, people get to like 100% confidence. Like they think they know everything. And then as they like, you know, get to learn a little bit more, they start to realize what they don't know. And then as they actually like learn, you know, what you need to know at the top level, then the confidence goes back up. But I think most people who like just do a bunch of sim racing and can spend a bunch of time, you know, practicing to get the same lap times as like pro guys, they think they know everything. And I was certainly one of those. But then once you get into like real race cars, there's just so much more nuance to it than in the sim. And to be honest, like there's less feel in most modern real cars than there is in simulators. And so, you know, you have less practice time too. There's just like way more that goes into real racing. So at that point I thought like, okay, I know everything, like put me in a car. And then as I have been in more cars, I've kind of learned more that I didn't know. And I've certainly like improved in areas that I didn't know that I could, since then. But, you know, just being able to see like my name against like other real pros was my trigger to be like, okay, I'll try, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a confidence boost for sure, I'd imagine. Now, speaking of different cars, now coaching, when did you know that you wanted to coach? Was there a moment that you just decided, okay, I should just do this because it makes sense? Or did you have a pinnacle moment?
Yeah. So when I was like just doing track days in my BRZ, like I said, I was like instructing some of the like NASA track days here and there. And that's really low level stuff. Like they just, you know, I don't know if you've done it. Like they just put you in the passenger seat of some random guy's car and you...
I haven't done the passenger seat yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you're lucky. But
I've heard stories.
Yeah, they just put you in the passenger seat of like some random like novice guy's car. And it's honestly, I'm talking shit about it. It's pretty chill. You basically have to tell them like, you know, yellow flag here, like slow down, or like make sure to check your mirrors. There's someone who wants to pass you, or remind them to point by and stuff. But I was coaching some guy, I think his name was Zach, in a blue BRZ at VIR. And I say coaching, I was instructing him. But I was like, you know, giving him like actual coaching. Like he was a nice guy. I was trying to just help him get faster. And he was like, dude, like I've been to like, you know, some of the like BMW and Porsche schools and stuff like that. And that was honestly like way more helpful than that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So since then I would like go to track days just like with my buddies in college who are really into cars, and I would like try to help them get fast. I'd try not to be annoying about it, but like they would always like appreciate it and like end up going way faster and enjoying their days more. And in terms of like just going to recreational track days, I ended up like having more fun helping my close friends go faster than just like driving around myself. So that was like what kind of piqued my interest in that. And then when I was racing Spec Miata, you know, Evan Jacobs and Nate Del Carmen, I was racing against Evan and he was like, dude, do you want to come like work with us down here? And I was like, sure. I don't know what else I could possibly do. So absolutely. And that was kind of this, like my first like professional, you know, gig of like actually being paid to do it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. You had quite a journey, Ren.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, at this point in your life, what would you say is next for you? Do you have other goals now that you've reached this point to where you kind of figured out racing? Is there more?
Honestly, I don't feel like I've figured out racing.
Okay.
Like this year I have in terms of like actual wheel to wheel racing, I have the least direction that I have had since I started racing. Because when I was doing Spec Miata, like I briefly mentioned like the MX-5 Cup shootout, that was my goal when I was starting Spec Miata, was to eventually get invited to the shootout. And I did a couple years of Spec Miata. I won our regional championship, which was like the highest level of what I could do. And then I went and raced on the East Coast last year in Spec Miata. I also like got a big sponsor to do some part-time MX-5 Cup starts last year, which is kind of what Mazda wants you to do now. And kind of throughout the whole year, like my goal was to be invited to the shootout last year because I felt like I was pretty certainly, one of the top guys that would have been there. Mm-hmm. And throughout the whole year, they were kind of like, giving me affirmation, like, yep, you'll definitely be there. Like, you're one of our front runners, blah, blah, blah. And then they didn't even invite me. So it was like, that really threw off my plan because I felt like I could have turned that scholarship. They basically give you half a year of a scholarship. And the sponsor that I had last year was like, yeah, if you get any money from them at all, I will cover the rest of the bill. And then if you win the Rookie of the Year title, they give you like 80 grand more. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that if I got money from Mazda, I could turn that into 2 full years of MX-5 Cup racing. And then they didn't even like give me a shot, which really threw me off. It was pretty shocking. So that sucked. And then this year, like I've got to do a couple races, just like basically like pro-am stuff, like coaching. There's a new series called Zenith Racing Series that a guy from down here, Dakota Dickerson, is starting. And it's kind of like a multi-class like enduro series. I've got to do a few of those because I'm coaching with a team. But it's by no means like my own personal racing, it's like basically me helping other guys, even though I'm driving the car, like it's still just me helping other guys. So I don't really know like when my next race will be. I don't know like what I'll be doing, but the weirdest thing is that I'm making like more money now than I ever have before, just because I'm doing so much more coaching stuff.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, I've had a girlfriend for like 2 years now and we live together and stuff. Like, I feel like I'm focusing on having like an actual real life as like a real person in a way that I haven't before. But I'm just trying to find like the balance of like being able to make enough money to survive and like enjoy being alive, like away from the racetrack, but still like race in a fulfilling way. Yeah. And so I don't totally know like what's next for me. I've been coaching this guy in McLaren Trophy, which is pretty helpful because I'm meeting a lot of like pros, and I'm trying to hop into one of those races this year, but those races are super expensive, budget that I definitely don't have. And so it's just like I'm kind of praying that like some magical opportunity will come along where it's like, hey, hop in the car, and it does happen, but it's rare. So that's kind of where I'm at. I kind of forgot to mention, I am going to the Nürburgring tomorrow to get my like license for that. So I'm going to do like a touring car race in it later this year.
Like you're flying out tomorrow, really, to Germany?
Yeah. Okay. So that's like kind of like the one thing keeping me going. But again, that's me like paying for it with my own money, which is not necessarily the most sustainable thing. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds.
That's fair. So it just seems like you're just kind of open to figuring out what's next, but you do want a balanced life, right? Because it seems like racing it's all or nothing.
Yeah, racing certainly has been all or nothing for me. I don't think it has to be, but I really want to be in a position where like I don't have like, even though I'm not racing a ton, I'm still barely at home. So like I want to be in the position where I'm like racing enough that it feels fulfilling to me, but not to the point where I'm like eating ice soup and like living in the trunk of my car.
Yeah. Yeah. So not any extreme, but somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was very insightful, Ren. I've definitely learned so much more about you that I didn't know. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything lastly you want to kind of sum it up just to share with the audience?
No, man, that's it. I really appreciate you having me here. My social media, the only one I really use is Instagram, and it's just my name. It's Ren Messinger. If anyone's curious about getting into racing or like what it would take, or you just need help, like, with some contacts to find the right people to help you get into it, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about that stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ren. I appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
This reminds me of a story. So as you were talking, I remembered myself as a kid. My dad noticed I love cars. So he'd always take me to this little go-kart place nearby. I wasn't tall enough initially. So he gave the guy a little tip and he just let me rip it around the kart track. And that's when he realized, oh, this guy likes to drive. And, I think this is why we do it. It's just that passion, that love for it. So I love sharing and I love hearing other people share their stories. And it was very enlightening. So appreciate you, Ren.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shifted Perspective is produced by Sociology of Everything, supported by Joeville Motorsports in City of Industry, California. I'm your host, Shift. Please feel free to reach out to me on social media, found in the description, or email me at shift@sociologyofeverything.com. Together, we shift perspective, expand possibilities, and become insiders. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next week.